And one day I was opening the door to this little house we lived in, and I said, well, there's always God. All you can do is pray at certain points. That's all you can do.
Really, our relationship inspired me to write it, and then it was a very simple song, and I really didn't think it was worth much, and Waylon loved it.
She was the quiet one, the faithful one, the woman who stayed when everyone else would have walked away. For decades, Jessi Colter was painted as the angel beside the outlaw, the gospel voice chained to a man chasing demons. But rumors have circulated for years that there's more to the story than what the public ever knew. Whispers of a hidden box, a burned letter, and a night in Tucson that Waylon Jennings allegedly swore could never be spoken of. According to those close to the couple, secrets may have been carried under floorboards and behind locked doors for over 40 years. Today, we're exploring the myths, the legends, and the speculation surrounding what many believe could forever change how we see country music's most legendary couple. Before she was the outlaw's wife, before the myth swallowed her whole, Jessi Colter was Miriam Johnson, a preacher's daughter from Phoenix, Arizona. She grew up in a strict but deeply musical household where the sound of gospel hymns filled every room. Her father, a stern but devout Pentecostal minister, insisted that music was a tool for the spirit, not for fame. But Miriam had something that couldn't be contained by Sunday services and small-town expectations. Her voice was soft yet electric, a velvet edge with lightning behind it, and even as a child, people noticed it carried something more than piety. By the time she was a teenager, she was playing piano at church revivals, learning how to command a room, not with volume, but with conviction. Those nights shaped her. The stage, the keys, the way a single song could move people to tears or silence. She didn't just want to sing, she wanted to live inside music. That hunger led her beyond Phoenix. As the 1960s took hold, she crossed paths with a man who would alter her course entirely, Duane Eddy, the guitar hero whose twang had already made him a rock and roll legend. He was older, already famous, and when he looked at Miriam Johnson, he saw more than just a preacher's daughter. He saw potential. They married young, and suddenly she wasn't a girl at a church piano anymore. She was on tour buses, in recording studios, and inside the chaotic machinery of the music industry. It was a trial by fire. She learned about contracts, about how managers could twist an artist's career, about how women in the business were often treated as ornaments rather than talents. She toured alongside Duane, watching from the wings as he conquered audiences with his guitar, but deep down, she felt her own voice slipping into the shadows. The marriage was rocky, burdened by the strains of fame, and the weight of two very different souls trying to survive in the same storm. In time, it cracked, and Miriam walked away. But she didn't walk back to obscurity. She walked toward reinvention. By the early 1970s, she was no longer Miriam Johnson. She emerged as Jessi Colter, a name that carried the steel of her past and the fire of her ambition. She wasn't just a preacher's daughter anymore, and she wasn't just someone's wife. She had her own sound, a blend of country, rock, and gospel that felt raw and different. In 1975, her breakout single, "I'm Not Lisa," catapulted her into the national spotlight. The song told the story of a woman living in the shadow of another, a haunting theme that many would later say seemed almost prophetic for what her life would soon become. But at that moment, Jessi was her own force. Her debut album carried a spark that Nashville couldn't ignore, and critics began to hail her as one of the fresh new voices of outlaw-era country. What makes this chapter so crucial is that it proves Jessi wasn't destined to be remembered only as Waylon Jennings' partner. She had already carved her own place in country music history. She was talented, ambitious, and tough enough to leave one marriage and keep pushing for a career in a world that rarely made room for women beyond background harmonies. But just as the spotlight began to focus on her, a storm was waiting, a storm named Waylon Jennings. Their paths collided at the peak of his rising fame, and though many believe she might have sensed the chaos trailing him, Jessi stepped into it anyway. Because while Miriam Johnson had been raised to sing for the church, Jessi Colter was about to learn what some say meant singing through fire. When Jessi Colter first crossed paths with Waylon Jennings, she wasn't just meeting a man, she was meeting a force of nature. By the early 1970s, Waylon was already known as one of country music's most magnetic performers. He carried himself like a storm wrapped in leather, a mix of swagger, rebellion, and undeniable charm. Fans adored him. But those close to him knew that behind the outlaw image was a man spiraling deeper into chaos. Pills, whiskey, and endless nights on the road had already carved deep shadows into his life. Yet to Jessi, there was more to him than the legend. Beneath the loud guitars and the cocaine-fueled bravado, she caught glimpses of something else. A poet's heart, a broken boy still hiding inside the rebel king. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. Their relationship was never calm. It wasn't a whirlwind romance the way tabloids like to sell celebrity love stories. It was a storm, fierce and unpredictable. They would fight bitterly one night and cling desperately to each other the next. Waylon's disappearances became routine. Some nights he was gone until morning. Other times he vanished for days, leaving Jessi to wonder whether he was holed up in a hotel with another woman, drowning himself in drugs, or maybe lying face down in some anonymous room, his demons finally having the last word. And yet, she stayed. Not because she was weak, not because she was trapped, but because she believed her love might be the one thing strong enough to anchor him to life. She told herself that leaving would kill him, that walking away meant he wouldn't survive the night. To outsiders, Jessi seemed to embody grace and loyalty. She stood by him at shows, smiled for the cameras, and played her part as the angelic counterbalance to his chaos. But rumors suggest that behind closed doors, the cost of that loyalty grew heavier. Some friends reportedly whispered when they noticed what appeared to be bruises, subtle but enough to raise questions. Jessi always denied these claims, insisting that Waylon had never raised a hand to her, that the only scars he left were emotional. But there was one night in Houston in 1978 that, according to later accounts, she could never fully erase. After a show, it's been said that Waylon came back to the room in a troubling state, and that Jessi later wrote in her journal about feeling unrecognized. What happened after that moment remains unclear, as Jessi never spoke of it publicly. But the speculation around that night suggests something inside her shifted, and she buried the memory deep, never letting anyone close enough to dig it out. And yet, as much as Waylon unraveled, Jessi still rose. In 1975, her hit "I'm Not Lisa" became one of the most talked about songs in country music. But even at the height of her career, the success came with a painful irony. The song told the story of a woman living in the shadow of someone else, and for Jessi, that shadow wasn't just a metaphor. As Waylon's fame exploded and he became the poster child of the outlaw country movement, her star dimmed in comparison. No matter how strong her voice, the world increasingly saw her not as Jessi Colter, but as Waylon Jennings' wife. Her identity was being rewritten by the man she loved. This was the paradox of Jessi and Waylon. Together they were electric, an iconic pair that fans adored. But in private, reports suggest the cracks were widening. Those close to the couple claim Jessi saw the man behind the myth, the sleepless nights, the paranoia, the pain he drowned in cocaine. According to rumors, she kept track of every breakdown in a hidden notebook, the excuses he fed management, the fake names he allegedly used at motels, the nights he collapsed before shows. It wasn't just love she was carrying anymore, many believe. It was his entire burden, a weight no one else dared to shoulder. And it was only a matter of time before that weight would press her into what some describe as the darkest corner of her life. Because loving Waylon Jennings, by all accounts, wasn't just about standing beside an outlaw. It was about surviving the storm without losing yourself completely. By the late 1970s, Waylon Jennings was no longer just battling addiction, by most accounts. He was at war with himself, and Jessi was the one caught in the crossfire. The night in Houston, 1978, is said to have marked a turning point. According to reports, Waylon had just come off stage, drenched in sweat, restless from cocaine and whiskey, his voice rougher than the crowd had ever heard it. Back at the hotel, it's claimed that Jessi waited, as she had done countless times before, but what walked through the door that night wasn't the man she had loved or even the outlaw the world adored. Rumors suggest he appeared vacant, glassy-eyed, pacing the room like a stranger who'd lost his way. When he finally looked at her, accounts say his stare was cold, almost unrecognizing. "He looked through me like I wasn't real," Jessi allegedly admitted in her journal. It was the moment, many believe, she realized the addiction wasn't just breaking his body, it was hollowing out his soul. The years that followed only deepened the cracks. By 1981, during a tour stop in Memphis, the storm hit again, according to those who claim to know the story. Reports suggest Jessi had been begging Waylon to slow down, to rest, to eat, anything to pull him back from the spiral. But instead of softening, it said he lashed out. It wasn't physical, by accounts. It was worse in some ways. The venom in his words allegedly cut deeper than any bruise could. Jessi would later write, according to reports, that it was like watching the devil speak through the lips of someone she once loved. Overwhelmed and terrified, the story goes that she grabbed her keys and drove aimlessly through the Tennessee night, headlights carving lonely lines across empty highways, her mind replaying every moment of their turbulent love. Hours later, exhausted and broken, she reportedly returned to the motel. The room was empty. Waylon was gone. On the nightstand, legend has it, sat a small wooden box. No note, no explanation, just the box. According to the story, Jessi didn't open it. Not then, not for decades. She tucked it away, almost afraid of what it might contain. What could a man like Waylon, in the throes of paranoia and addiction, have left behind? She didn't want to know, but she couldn't throw it away either. That box, if the rumors are true, became a symbol of everything she couldn't say out loud. For 30 years, it's said to have sat in silence, waiting, until the day she finally opened it and found something that changed the way she saw her entire marriage. Still, Jessi didn't leave him. People always asked why. Why endure the chaos, the lies, the pain? Her answer was always the same. If I left, he would die, and if he died, it would be my fault. She wasn't clinging to him out of weakness. She was tethered by a belief that her love was the only barrier standing between him and destruction. To many, that sounded tragic. To Jessi, it was survival. She became his caretaker, his confessor, his last line of defense against a darkness that wanted to consume him. And in the process, she started to lose herself. From the outside, they were still country royalty, showing up together at awards shows, smiling on red carpets, presenting the image of outlaw king and queen. But inside hotel rooms, backstage corridors, and their own quiet home, many believe the storm never really calmed. The box from Memphis, according to these accounts, remained locked away, its secret festering in silence, just like the rumors of bruises she denied and the tears she hid from the world. It was her burden to carry, some say her unspoken proof that life with Waylon Jennings was both a love story and a war zone. And while the fans kept singing along to his anthems of rebellion, whispers suggest Jessi was already writing her own story in the shadows, one filled with secrets, burned letters, and a promise she wasn't sure she could keep forever. By the early 1980s, Waylon Jennings had crossed a line even his closest friends feared he would never come back from, according to those who knew him. Cocaine was no longer just a vice by all accounts. It was his constant companion, riding his back like a shadow that never left. Nights blurred into mornings, days disappeared. And the man who once commanded stages with ease now often struggled to hold himself upright. Reports suggest Jessi was there through it all, quietly documenting the unraveling of the man she loved. She allegedly kept a notebook, one no one was supposed to see, where she tracked the places he disappeared to, the names he used when checking into motels, the lies he fed to managers when shows were missed. It wasn't a diary of romance, they say. It was a map of a man who didn't want to be found. Every page was another piece of evidence, according to rumors, that Waylon was slipping further from reality. The paranoia became impossible to ignore. Jessi would wake in the dead of night to find him pacing their living room, eyes wide and bloodshot, ranting about government vans following the tour bus, about voices in the walls, about music only he could hear. Sometimes he'd sit at the table, scribbling incoherent lyrics, words that seemed to come from another place entirely. Other nights, he'd stand silently at the window for hours, as though waiting for someone or something to appear out of the darkness. Fans saw a larger-than-life outlaw stomping across stages, leather and grit in every move. Jessi saw a man haunted, unraveling, torn between genius and madness. And yet, even in his worst moments, flashes of tenderness would break through. When he picked up a guitar and managed to string together a song, Jessi could still see the dreamer he once was. It was those fleeting glimpses that kept her anchored, but they weren't enough to silence the storm brewing around them. Behind the myth of outlaw country, Jessi was living in a house where reality itself seemed fragile. Then one day, according to one of the more persistent rumors, a delivery arrived at their home without explanation. A baby grand piano. No note, no sender, just a faded inscription carved under the lid, "To the one who stayed." The story goes that Jessi never knew who sent it. Waylon never acknowledged it. But at night, when the chaos of the day finally went quiet, it said she sat down at that piano and began to play again. Gospel hymns, lullabies, songs she hadn't touched in years. It became her refuge, many believe, the one place she could still feel like Jessi, not just the shadow beside a legend. But the piano didn't only heal her, according to those who've heard this tale. It also unearthed memories she thought she had buried. As her fingers found familiar melodies, fragments of the past are said to have begun to surface. Whispers of that night in Tucson, of a letter Waylon had once allegedly forced her to burn, a letter he swore would destroy everything if it was ever seen. For years, according to the legend, she had convinced herself it was forgotten, lost in the ashes of that night. But the piano didn't forget, or so the story goes. Each chord seemed to pull the memory back, sharper and darker than before. She began to wonder, it's been said, if the secret she had buried wasn't gone at all, but waiting, humming beneath the music she played. Waylon's addiction would eventually take him to the brink, but reports suggest Jessi's burden wasn't just caring for a man who was falling apart. It was carrying the weight of secrets she couldn't speak, secrets that tied her not only to his music, but to his madness. Every note she played, every night she sat by his side, was haunted, many believe by the fear that one day the truth would break through the floorboards she had tried so hard to nail shut. And as the 1980s wore on, that truth allegedly crept closer, waiting for the moment it could no longer be silenced. For years, rumors suggest Jessi Colter tried to forget that night in Tucson. It was one of the few memories she allegedly refused to revisit, even in her journals. According to whispers that have circulated for decades, Waylon had once pressed a letter into her hands, his voice low, trembling in a way she had never heard before. "This can't ever exist," he supposedly told her, and then demanded that she burn it. The story goes that Jessi obeyed, but the image of the paper curling into flames haunted her. She never revealed what was written on that page, not to family, not even to her closest friends, at least according to those who claimed to know. But decades later, sitting at her piano, she allegedly admitted in her notes, "There's a reason I stopped singing that year. Something I saw, something I did." The memory of Tucson never really left her, many believe. It lingered in the silence, waiting for its chance to return. That chance came in 1992, according to the legend. While cleaning out an old closet, the story goes that Jessi stumbled upon something she thought had been lost to time, a cassette tape. Written across the label in Waylon's unmistakable scrawl was supposedly a single word, "Tombstone." At first it said she hesitated to play it, her hands shaking as she slid the tape into the player. What allegedly came through the speakers wasn't a song, it was Waylon's voice, but not the confident baritone fans adored. This was different, according to those who claim knowledge of the tape. Broken, rambling, he wept openly, mumbling about a choice he had made in 1974. A choice, he said, that had buried more than just a name. His words were fractured, incoherent at times, but the weight behind them was undeniable, or so the story goes. This wasn't a performance, it was supposedly a confession, and it was never meant to be heard. Reports claim Jessi sat frozen, listening to the man she loved pour out a pain he had never shared in daylight. What exactly he was admitting remained unclear. He spoke in fragments, half-sentences, his voice cracking between sobs. But one thing was certain, according to those who've heard this story, he was talking about something that had been hidden, something buried, both literally and figuratively. When the tape clicked off, it said Jessi didn't cry, she simply tucked it away. She allegedly placed it in a safety deposit box alongside the wooden motel box from Memphis and another piece of evidence, a photograph she had kept hidden for years. The pictures supposedly showed Waylon standing outside a small desert church, his arm draped around a man Jessi didn't recognize. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, were the words, "EW, don't forget what we did," or at least that's what the rumors claim. The pieces didn't make sense on their own, but together they hinted at something larger, something Jessi was never ready to confront, according to those who followed this tale. Determined to understand, she allegedly quietly hired a private investigator. Off the books, no names attached. She wanted to trace the man in the photograph, the church in the background, the initials scrawled in faded ink, or so the story goes. What the investigator supposedly discovered shook her to the core. Rumors of an unmarked grave in a desert cemetery, tied to sealed court records from 1975. The documents were allegedly hidden under an alias, locked away in legal bureaucracy, that suggested someone very powerful wanted the matter buried, literally and figuratively. It's important to note that none of these claims have been independently verified. Jessi never spoke of what she learned, according to those close to her. She didn't go to the press. She didn't tell her son. But in one rare interview, when asked about the greatest burden she had ever carried, she answered with words that seemed to point directly back to that secret. "There's a reason I sing to God more than people now. Some things only heaven can forgive." To the public, it was just another cryptic remark from the widow of an outlaw. To those who knew the whispers, it was a chilling reminder that Jessi had allegedly carried more than just a marriage on her shoulders. She had carried a truth too dangerous to reveal, or at least that's what the legend suggests. From that moment forward, everything in Jessi's life seemed colored by the weight of what she had allegedly discovered. Every gospel hymn she sang, every lyric she wrote, carried a shadow, many believe. She wasn't just the woman who stayed, she was the woman who knew, according to the whispers. And the Tucson secret, the letter, the tape, the photo, the grave, became the silent ghost trailing her for the rest of her life, or at least that's how the story has been told over the years. If the tape labeled Tombstone was haunting, what came next was even more disturbing, according to the rumors. In the years after Waylon's death, whispers began circulating among old session musicians and crew members. They claimed that Waylon had recorded a track in 1989 that never saw the light of day. Unlike his other outlaw anthems, this one wasn't about freedom or rebellion. It was darker, more intimate, and some said it was a confession. They called it the fifth verse, a secret song only a handful of people had allegedly ever heard. According to one engineer, Waylon recorded it late at night in his home studio, alone with just a guitar and his thoughts. The reel was never logged by RCA, never mentioned in contracts, and never added to official archives, or so the story goes. It simply disappeared, like someone wanted it erased. The few who claimed to have heard it spoke about it in hushed tones. The lyrics, they said, mentioned a preacher's lie, a grave with no name, and a woman who knew too much. To fans, it sounded like myth-making, the kind of rumor that grows legs in smoky bars and backstage corners. But to those who knew Jessi, the meaning was supposedly unmistakable. That woman was her. She wasn't just the wife of an outlaw. She was allegedly the keeper of something too heavy to sing out loud. In 2010, the whispers caught fire when an anonymous blogger posted a grainy 20-second audio clip online. The fragment, allegedly ripped from an old demo tape, sounded eerily like Waylon's voice humming a melody no one could identify. Within hours, the post vanished, deleted without explanation, but not before fans downloaded and shared it, according to reports. Conspiracy threads exploded. YouTube videos dissected the grainy hum, insisting it was evidence of the lost fifth verse. Some even claimed the clip matched a lyric sheet discovered in a private collection, one that contained the chilling line, "She held the key, but never the map. The lie was buried where prayers overlap." None of these claims have been verified. When asked directly about the rumor during a rare Q&A in Texas in 2012, Jessi didn't deny it, according to those who were there. She didn't laugh it off or change the subject. Instead, it's reported she lowered her gaze, folded her hands, and said softly, "He recorded many things he never wanted the world to hear." The room froze. For years afterward, that one sentence fueled speculation that Jessi was sitting on proof. A tape, a lyric sheet, something that connected the dots between Tucson, the burned letter, and the unmarked grave, though again, none of this has been confirmed. And then came the revelation no one expected, according to those who follow this story. Not long after that Q&A, rumors suggest Jessi reached out to a Nashville historian known for uncovering lost outlaw-era recordings. She allegedly handed him a sealed envelope and a battered USB drive. Her only instruction was supposedly chilling in its simplicity: "Release this after I'm gone." She refused to explain further, the story goes. The historian later claimed to have confirmed its authenticity, but never revealed its contents. When pressed in interviews about what was inside, his response was cryptic. "It's not a love story. It's a warning." For Jessi, this wasn't about attention or myth-making, many believe. It was about timing. She had allegedly carried Waylon's secrets for decades, hidden boxes and tapes tucked away where no one could touch them. But as she aged, she seemed to realize that silence couldn't last forever. The truth had to find its way out, even if only after she was no longer here to bear the consequences, or at least, that's what people close to her have suggested. Whether that truth was hidden in the rumored fifth verse, the Tombstone cassette, or the burned letter from Tucson, no one could say for certain. What was clear, however, was that Jessi had become the last living witness to a story country music wasn't ready to hear, according to believers of this legend. And the question hanging over everyone was simple but chilling. When the day comes, will the world be able to handle what she allegedly left behind? By the time Jessi Colter reached her 80s, her public appearances had become rare. She was quiet, reserved, carefully selective about when and where she showed up, but when she did, it was never without intention. In 2022, she accepted an invitation to a small private tribute show in Nashville, a gathering of musicians honoring the legacy of outlaw country. No one expected her to perform. Many assumed she was simply there to watch from the sidelines, a living relic of a past era. But midway through the night, according to attendees, Jessi quietly asked to take the stage. She sat down at the piano, the spotlight catching the lines of age and grief etched across her face. For a moment, the room held its breath. She began with "Storms Never Last," the duet she had once recorded with Waylon, a song that had become their unofficial anthem. The audience swayed, comforted by the familiar melody. But halfway through, something changed. According to those who were there, Jessi allegedly began altering the lyrics, subtly at first. A word shifted here, a phrase bent there. Then came an entirely new verse that no one had ever heard before, at least according to reports. "You promised the preacher we'd never go back, but I still hear the shovel, the earth going black." The room froze. Songwriters leaned forward. Industry veterans exchanged startled glances. It wasn't just poetic improvisation, they claimed. It was a direct reference to the long-rumored Tucson secret, the buried past Waylon had once sworn her to silence over. Jessi finished the song without another word, stood slowly, and exited through the back before anyone could question her, according to witnesses. Phones had been prohibited at the event, so there was no video, but the whispers spread instantly. What exactly had Jessi just admitted, or had she? Not long after, fans noticed something unusual, or so the story goes. A small, unpromoted acoustic album allegedly appeared on a little-known streaming site, uploaded under Jessi's birth name, Miriam Johnson. The album supposedly had no liner notes, no label involvement, and no marketing. Its title was simple but chilling: Floorboards. 10 tracks in total, stripped down to just piano and voice, according to those who claim to have heard it. Most were gospel hymns and quiet reflections, but one track in particular reportedly sent shockwaves through the small circle of fans who stumbled upon it. Track 7, titled Tucson. The song was unlike anything Jessi had ever released, according to reports. Her voice, older and worn, carried a rawness that made every word sting. The lyrics allegedly painted vivid images: a desert church, a midnight confession, a man digging into dry earth while a woman prayed under flickering lights. One line in particular left listeners stunned. They claimed, "He said the bottle was empty, but the deed was done, so we buried the truth before the morning sun." It wasn't metaphorical. It wasn't vague. It was direct. Too direct for coincidence, or at least that's what believers insist. For days, fans reportedly replayed the track, debating its meaning, dissecting every lyric. But just as quickly as it had appeared, the album vanished, according to the legend. Within a week, Floorboards was allegedly scrubbed from servers, the files deleted. Only a handful of people supposedly managed to download it before it disappeared. But those who heard it insisted it was Jessi's final confession, hidden in plain sight. However, no verified copies have surfaced publicly. Around the same time, locals in Tucson began whispering about unusual activity near an old church, long tied to outlaw legends, according to some accounts. Records later confirmed that a portion of its basement had been excavated under the guise of foundation repairs. Officials said it was routine construction. Some residents swore they saw government vehicles at the site. Whether coincidence or not, the timing was impossible to ignore for those following the story. For Jessi, the alleged release of floorboards and that unguarded performance in Nashville weren't about selling records, many believe. They were about unburdening herself in the only way she knew how, through song. After decades of silence, she had supposedly finally put pieces of the truth into the world. Not in interviews, not in memoirs, but in music. And for those who listened closely, it was clear to them. The secret Waylon had allegedly sworn her to carry had finally found its way into the open, even if only for a fleeting moment. Or at least, that's what the legend claims. As Jessi Colter entered her final years, the air around her seemed to grow heavier, thick with the weight of things unsaid. To the public, she appeared serene, gracious in interviews, soft-spoken on stage, always smiling with the quiet dignity of someone who had endured more than most. But those who spent time with her noticed the changes, they claimed. She kept her piano room locked, sometimes for weeks at a time. Letters piled up unopened on her desk. Neighbors recalled seeing her burn stacks of notebooks in her backyard fire pit, standing for hours in silence as decades of journals turned to ash. It wasn't bitterness driving her, observers suggested. It was something else. A decision to take her secrets with her, or at least to control when and how they would finally be revealed. Reporters pressed her in interviews about Waylon's darker years, about the stories that had circulated for decades. Jessi never lied, but she never told the whole truth either. She would deflect with lines like, "He made peace with God, that's all that matters." To fans, it sounded like forgiveness. To those who knew her well, her eyes told another story, or so they believed. They were eyes that had seen too much, eyes that carried the kind of silence that only comes from protecting someone else's ghost. Still, rumors continued to grow. Whispers about the burned Tucson letter, about the Tombstone cassette, about the missing fifth verse. Fans speculated endlessly, but Jessi never confirmed or denied. Instead, she began speaking in parables, telling vague stories about mercy, about how some things only heaven can forgive. At one Nashville songwriters round, when an audience member shouted, "Play something from Tombstone," reports claimed Jessi's hands shook visibly. She ended her set early and walked off stage without another word. But Jessi wasn't leaving the world empty-handed. According to those close to her, after her mysterious upload of the Floorboards album vanished, she allegedly made one last deliberate move. Trusted friends later revealed that she had entrusted a sealed leather case and a letter to a Nashville historian. Her instructions were supposedly simple. Make sure it finds the right ears when I'm gone. Inside was said to be a USB drive, recordings, and a written account in her own words. The historian never revealed the contents, but when pressed, he gave the same cryptic response he'd offered years before. It's not a love story, it's a warning. For fans and historians alike, Jessi became the final thread in a story that was never meant to unravel, or so the legend goes. She wasn't just the outlaw's wife, or the loyal gospel singer who stood by her man. According to believers, she was the last keeper of a truth too dark for the spotlight, a truth Waylon himself had once allegedly begged her to burn. Her silence wasn't weakness, many insist, it was survival. And when she finally chose to let pieces of the truth slip through, it wasn't for fame or attention, they claim. It was because, after decades of carrying the burden alone, she supposedly wanted the world to understand that the outlaw myth wasn't the whole story. There were shadows under the floorboards, buried with shovels and songs, and she had allegedly been the only one left who remembered where they were hidden. By the time Jessi Colter faded from the public eye, her health fragile and her appearances scarce, the world realized what she truly was, the last witness, according to the mythology. The last person alive who supposedly knew the full weight of Waylon Jennings' secrets, and the only voice left to sing the unsung verses of their story. She had survived love, storms, silence, and the long burden of truth. But as she herself once said, the truth doesn't die with the people who live it. It waits, and that waiting was exactly what she allegedly left behind, a legacy of unanswered questions, unfinished truths, and songs that may never be heard until long after she is gone. Jessi Colter was never just the woman who stood beside Waylon Jennings. She was the one who carried the weight of his storms, his music, and his secrets long after the applause faded, or at least that's what the legend tells us. To the world, she was the quiet angel tethered to an outlaw, but according to whispers and rumors, behind closed doors, she was the last keeper of a truth too dangerous to sing. The floorboards, the burned letter, the hidden tape, the lost verse, all of it pointed to a story buried deeper than country music was ever meant to go, according to those who believe. And though Jessi allegedly revealed fragments in her final years, the full truth still lingers in shadows, waiting, because some stories aren't meant to end with a headline or a song. Some are left behind as warnings, whispered in lyrics, hidden in silence, carried only by the last voice willing to remember. And for Jessi Colter, that voice was always hers. What do you think about these legends surrounding Jessi Colter and Waylon Jennings? Do you believe there's truth hidden in the rumors, or is it all just myth and speculation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed diving into this mystery with us, make sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into music's greatest legends and untold stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.